I just wanted to let you know that we'll be recording it. So welcome in, everyone. This webinar is really to tell you a little bit more about our outdoor recreation grant opportunities at Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. My name's Hannah Jones. I'm one of the assistant division administrators in our planning and programming division at Game and Parks, and I oversee both of these programs, the Land and Water Conservation Fund and then the Recreational Trails Program. I work with both. And then I'm actually going to send it over to Alex here to introduce himself.
Hi, and I'm Alex Duryea, the Recreational Trails Manager here at Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, and I administer the Recreational Trails Program.
Hi, I'm Sherry Sorensen, and I am the grants coordinator for the LWCF program.
And good morning. My name is Erin Johnson. I work primarily with LWCF Land and Water Conservation Fund, but during this webinar, I'm going to be managing the Q&A. That is the only way that you're going to be able to ask questions. At the bottom of your screen, there's the Q&A button. And so throughout the entire presentation, feel free to put your questions in there. Anything that, while the presentation is going on, I will. Otherwise, they will be logged to answer during our live question and answer section. And anything that we are unable to get answered at this time, we will follow up after the presentation. We will be sending a follow-up email that will include answers to those questions too. So feel free to put any questions in there and we will take care of it. All right. And Alex is going to get started with Recreational Trails Program. Thanks.
All right. Let's see here. Thank you. Okay. So Recreational Trails Program has been around for over 30 years here. And the main things to know here is that it's a 80-20 reimbursable grant. So you apply and you make expenditures throughout the life cycle of your grant, and we'll reimburse you basically 80% of your project costs for trail projects. Generally, $250,000 is the ceiling for reimbursement. You can technically request a waiver of that maximum if you desire, but generally the maximum project awards that we give out are $250,000. The program generally receives about $1.2 million from Federal Highway Administration every year, and we have to split that up. 30% goes to non-motorized projects, 40% goes to diversified use projects, and then 30% remaining goes to motorized projects. Generally, we combine the motorized or the non-motorized and diversified use funding into one pool for non-motorized projects. And generally, the motorized pool of funding is not terribly competitive. Usually we get a couple of projects every year that apply. But if you do have motorized projects, I always encourage you to apply. So generally eligible entities or sponsors are villages, cities, political subdivisions, NRDs. We can even do things like school districts, tribal nations, that kind of stuff. And then the maintenance life for these trail projects that is required by the grant is 25 years for non-motorized and 10 years for motorized. But a couple of common projects that we see are like you could do like a concrete trail, obviously, mountain biking trails, that kind of stuff. Those are just kind of some general trails that we fund with this program. So next slide, please. This is just a graphic from American Trails, or the Coalition for Recreational Trails, excuse me. And it shows how Recreational Trails Program is funded. So basically, off-highway vehicle fuel tax is collected, and it goes into the Highway Trust Fund. And then coming back out is the $84 million appropriation that Congress gives to the Recreational Trails Program every year, as a set aside from the transportational alternatives part of the Highway Trust Fund. So, and just if you look on there, one of the big things about this program is we're only actually receiving about a third of what actually is going into the Highway Trust Fund. So that's it's something that the Coalition for Recreational Trails has been working on is trying to fully fund the recreational trails program. So in hopes of getting more money appropriated than the 1.2 million, for example, for Nebraska, it would go up if that ever got changed. So keep an eye on future transportation bills for that info. Next slide, please. So for Match for Your Trail project, cash is king always. When you apply, you'll want to identify what matching funds you have available for your project. Donations also are acceptable, and in-kind match as well. So like work the city does for a trail project can be used as well, though that has to be very well documented. So be sure that if you want to use that, you have the necessary checks and balances in place to document it correctly. So and then you can also use NRDs potentially also sometimes have funding available to assist a city with match on a local trail project as well. Tourism grants are also out there at the county level. And then with RTP, you can match fed to fed with it. Depending on the fund that you're using, though. Sometimes it might be okay with RTP, but it may not be okay with the other federal source. But just some examples like that are FEMA funding or CDBG, for example. So next slide, please. I get asked a lot of times, how many applications do we get per year? And that depends every year. So we get about 10 to 15 per year usually, and but it could be as high as 20. We've had as high as 30, I think. And then we generally award about 4 to 5 applications per year. Again, at that $250,000 level is what we generally award each project at. You can have a project that requests less than that. That's not going to hurt you at all. But generally we won't award more than that. So for example, if your project's like $1 million, for example, total project cost, the maximum we generally will award is that $250,000. And the rest you'll have to come up with on your own. So next slide, please. Okay, timeline for recreational trails program. So let's just say that you apply this year, and we open our applications here coming up in May, and then applications will be due in September of 2024. Then you will have our selection meeting in November generally of 2024, and then you will get if you are selected, you'll get a notice of award in January 2025. So that this first year here is just the application cycle. If you are selected, let's say in January 2025, I'll give you your notice of award, and we'll go through grant training basically, and usually in March of that same year, so 2025 as well. And then I'll give you notice to proceed to procure your consultant, do your NEPA, and all that stuff is generally the first year of your design. And then hopefully get all that done later in the years for potentially putting the project out to bid in kind of the fall/winter time of 2025 for a 2026 construction window. That's the ideal life cycle of a Rec Trails Program grant project. Does it always happen? No. Can it happen faster? Maybe. Can it happen slower? Absolutely. It just kind of depends. So it's really good to keep this in mind when you're planning your application and talking to your donors or your village board about this trail project that you're wanting to fund with Rec Trails Program. Know that it's not going to happen in 6 months. It's not going to happen even in a year from now, probably. You really should be reporting about a 2-year cycle from when you're awarded for when you think the trail project will actually be completed. So let's see here. Just for those that don't know, sorry, NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and that's an environmental review that needs to occur. So I meant to spell that out earlier. Okay, so where do you go to apply? So on our website, outdoornebraska.gov, if you search for Rec Trails Program or RTP in the little search bar, it'll bring you to our RTP page and has our application link to our web portal. So All our grants are online now for Rec Trails program, and there is no paper application anymore. But basically what you need to do is you go in and create an account and for your city or village or sponsor, and fill out the web grants application, which I believe I have an online guide on how to do that on the website as well. So, but if you ever need help with the application or filling it out, I won't do it for you, but I can certainly give you some pointers and also take a look at things if I have time towards the end of the submission period. So we are going to be changing some policies at the state level here that might affect some of the scoring criteria. So just keep an eye out for potentially some scoring changes that might be coming up here. So next slide, please. So getting back into some eligible project types, you know, Rec Trails program can be used for a wide range of things. It's often used for new trail construction, so new trail systems, expansions, linkages, restoration of existing trails. So if you have like an old dilapidated asphalt trail that needs milled and resurfaced, you know, that's absolutely an eligible thing. Trailhead or trail side amenities, so like parking lots, staging areas, restrooms, kiosks, anything that has a direct relationship to a trail can be funded with Rec Trails program. If you have something that's kind of on the fringe and you just don't quite know if it might be eligible, definitely give me a call, let me know. I can research it. And if I need to, I'll ask Fed Highway if they would permit it. So water trails are technically eligible under recreational trails program. I will say that they, while they have been funded for sure, you kind of got to catch it on a less competitive year. Just water trails tend to be less competitive in this program for whatever reason. So just know that you can apply for a water trail, you know, kayak, canoe, paddling access site, that kind of thing. But just it doesn't always work out. It's sometimes not the best funding mechanism for it. So and then, you know, accessibility, assessing a trail for accessibility or maintenance is also something that can be done with Rec Trails program funds. You can't do trail planning per se with it, but you know, if you have a long trail system that needs you know, some kind of assessment done for, you know, a bridge or something like that, that can be done with Rec Trails program. So next slide, please. Some more things that you can use Rec Trails program for example, land acquisition and easements for trails. You can buy land with Rec Trails program funds. The trail, I believe, has to be developed within 10 years, though, if you do purchase a property strictly for a trail. And the thing to always remember with Rec Trails program and any federal fund for that matter is to follow Uniform Act for any acquisitions, which is basically a real estate acquisition process that you have to follow with federal funds. So that's a really key component. You know, if you are looking at a trail project and wanting to develop it, don't go buying the property until you are basically told to do so. That can jeopardize your trail project. If you improperly acquire a piece of property, it may invalidate it for federal funds. So just be careful there. Call if you have questions about anything like that. And then also one that goes under the radar a lot is safety and education grants. We can actually fund trail safety and education projects. So like printing new materials, making new signage about trail safety, you know, safety video, that kind of thing. We can actually even do public training in a classroom. Is generally the best setting for that. You know, we sometimes get requests for like doing dirt work type trainings, and those don't work very well because you have to do NEPA on them, and that it ends up being, you know, spending tens of thousands of dollars to do a $10,000 training. It's just not quite cost effective in our program. So, but if you want to do classroom trainings, that's often a good option for you. Next slide, please. Real quick here, some tips for applying. You know, really think about what your trail is connecting, where you're providing access with this trail. Is it close to a school, giving kids an opportunity to utilize a trail within their school grounds? Think about if you're using public lands. If so, you know, think about is the land manager able to facilitate the trail that you're wanting to develop? You know, if it's on private ground, you know, is it on a place that's open to the public, generally accessible? So RTP trails have to be generally accessible to the public. You know, don't have to be open every day, for example, but they just need to be generally available to the public to use. One thing I always do tell folks is RTP does not fund sidewalks. So if your trail alignment is adjacent to a roadway, make sure it is, you know, at least 8 foot wide or so, usually, you know, and make sure that it doesn't look and walk like a sidewalk. The selection committee will, you know, find it and find that segment out and they'll ask questions about it. So make sure that you have good alignments that you're proposing in your trail projects. So let's see, for like your narratives, just be sure to follow the guidance that we have on our narratives for the application. Just be concise and clear. We don't need, you know, 10-page narratives. 2 is usually plenty, and all that. So and you know, we have our guidance document for the application. Please just check it out. Make sure you don't have any questions, and feel free to call if you do have questions. So new this year is Build America, Buy America. We actually have a waiver now from Federal Highway Administration for de minimis grants, such as RTP. So if your award amount is under $500,000, Build America, Buy America will not apply, which is a good thing. Which also opens the door potentially to funding trail maintenance equipment. If that's something you want to do, give me a call. Next slide, please. I think that's all I have for Rec Trails program. Again, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the program here. I know we're a little bit limited on time here, but if you have questions, we're going to do a question Q&A right now. Right? Yep. So I'll open up for question and answer here for Rec Trails program.
Okay, Alex, we've only, or I guess any questions that anybody else has, please put it in the Q&A. We've had a couple of questions so far. Alex, would you elaborate on, one of the questions was, can nonprofits partner with NRD to apply for this grant? So would you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so generally the nonprofit, we don't permit, at least in Nebraska, to be a direct sponsor of Rec Trails program funding for a construction project, but you can basically co-sponsor a project with an eligible entity like an NRD, city, that kind of thing. So it is possible. I recommend that you kind of maybe make like a memorandum of understanding with the NRD, so that you know who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and all that kind of stuff, because that can slow things down or, you know, cause hiccups down the road if those aren't identified from the start. But yes, it is possible. So if you are wanting to work with an NRD, and they are willing to do to be the sponsor for the project, it is possible. Yes.
Okay, next question for you, Alex. Do hard surface trails have to be ADA compliant?
Maybe. It's kind of a hard question to answer because there are exceptions to ADA, and the city or the sponsor, if they are wanting to make a concrete trail that is not ADA compliant for whatever reason, they just have to basically make the justification within one of the exceptions that are out there. And I would steer you to the Access Board has a guide for all that stuff, and look in that for all those exemptions. But it is possible. Do I recommend it? Probably not. Usually, if it's concrete trail, I would recommend you try to make it accessible. But there are some places that it just can't be done. So.
Okay, a couple more questions for you, Alex. What about a trail project that is shovel ready? That is, construction documents are done and the project is ready to go out to bid.
Excuse me there. Yes, that can be done too. I will say you still have to get a NEPA done though. So it's not going to be like you're just because you have your design all done, you will still have to complete the NEPA process through Federal Highway Administration and have it approved by them and do all the consultations for your project. It will definitely shorten your timeline a little bit, but I don't think it would cut out more than, I don't know, 6 months of your project at most. So just know that you can apply with a shovel-ready project. It's just that it's not like you get awarded in January and you get to bid it in February. You still have to go through the NEPA process and get that done. So there'll be a couple of months of those reviews to take place.
All right, Alex, would doing a trail plan for a newly constructed park be eligible or just the construction?
If it's a plan, no, it would not be eligible. But if it is designing the trail for the park, yes, it would be eligible. So I guess there's just it depends on what exactly you're trying to accomplish with that work. If you're actually designing the trail, you can use RTP funds for it. But if it's just kind of planning work, like doing community involvement, that kind of thing, no, it would not be eligible for rec trails program. But the construction would be absolutely, obviously. So.
All right, another question. If a trail project's full design includes a restroom, is the building an eligible activity?
If you're talking like a standalone CXT restroom, yes. But if you're talking building as in like a whole, I don't know, like an outdoor education center of some kind, the building itself, probably not entirely, but you could fund a restroom facility if it was for the trail inside of the building. Does that make sense? So yes, if the amenity is directly related to the trail itself, yes, it is eligible. But if it's like an outdoor education center or something like that, that's not quite really for the trail, then that would not be. So I just want to make that distinction when you said building. So.
All right, let's go. We'll do one more question and then we'll move on to the LWCF presentation, and we will have more time at the end of both presentations for questions about both programs. So Alex, this question: if a town has received funds from RTP in the past, what is the amount of time they need to wait to reapply? Also, do you give preference to cities or applicants who have not already received funding?
Yeah, in terms of the turnaround time to apply again, there is no wait period. You are welcome to apply even if you have an active RTP project ongoing. Although I will say it's best to usually wait until your project is done to apply again. Because sometimes the selection committee likes to say, well, you guys already have one going on. You should probably get that one done first, type of thing. But and then what was the second part of that question?
The second part was, oh shoot, I moved it. Hold on. I think you answered both of it. Yeah, it was if the amount of time to wait, and if you give
scoring
preference.
Yes, there is a little bit. So on our score sheet, it's like a point or two. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact score amount, but if you have received funding in the past, you get slightly less points for a certain part of the scoring criteria. Whereas if you have not received funding, you get a slightly higher amount. But it's a couple of points. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, to be honest. It's not going to make or break your project in the scoring realm. So
okay, that's all the questions we're going to answer on RTP right now. There were some questions that we answered in text, and if you look in the Q&A, you can see the answered questions. And there are a couple of questions that we will probably be following up directly with those individuals because they're very specific. So if you didn't get your question answered yet, hopefully either at the end or we will be following up directly. So, all right, now we are going to move on to Hannah with information about the Land and Water Conservation Fund.
Right, everybody. So I'll talk a little bit about our Land and Water Conservation Fund program at Game and Parks. This program's been around since 1965. The main funding source is actually from offshore leases for oil drilling. And so basically what they do is the revenue from that goes back into a pot of money through the Department of Interior and is dished out to states across the US to fund outdoor recreation. And so in Nebraska, we've been funding recreation right since 1965 through this program, and it's equated to about 64 million. And our grant program continues to see additional funding due to the Great American Outdoors Act that was passed in 2020, which permanently authorized the program. And so, which is a fantastic thing. Some of the eligible sponsors for this program include villages, cities, counties, NRDs, and then public power districts. I do always caveat this with the fact that, we do have a lot of nonprofits or friends groups or community champions that come to us and ask if they can apply. Oftentimes we always tell folks that you have to have one of these entities sponsor you. So you can be a co-sponsor. And actually we highly recommend it because some of these villages don't have the capacity to be able to apply and maintain the grant. And so for the life cycle of the grant. And so oftentimes they do lean on other folks to help them co-sponsor the grant, which is a fantastic opportunity. We get about 3.2 million annually. I kind of talked about this a little bit, but what we've seen is that we have seen an increase in our funding in Nebraska since that Great American Outdoors Act was passed in 2020. So, which is a phenomenal thing because that means that we can fund more outdoor recreation on the landscape. 60% of those funds go to competitive grants. And so each year we open our application process, typically from May to September. Around Labor Day this year it's closing September 6th, which is a Friday. 60% of that 3.2 million, so around 2 million, goes to political subdivisions and villages and cities across the state. The other 40% is by statute required to go to our state park system in Nebraska. In this program, to elaborate a little bit about the types of projects that this program funds, we fund a lot of playgrounds, splash pads, pools. We even fund things like wildlife viewing opportunities. We also fund trails. The other kind of newer things that we are seeing is like fishing enhancement opportunities, which is a pretty phenomenal thing. ADA compliant parking or restrooms, amenities, shower house facilities, campgrounds, bathrooms, things like that. So there's a pretty wide swath of things that this program can fund, as long as it is outdoor recreation and as long as we're not excluding access. This is a 50-50 reimbursable grant. So 50% of costs can be reimbursed with the grant. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that floor and ceiling looks like for us in just a moment. Anybody that applies for this program and gets funding is required to keep that parcel or property that has the federal nexus on it under the Land and Water Conservation Fund in outdoor recreation in perpetuity. So there is a perpetuity clause as part of this program. And what that means is that if you apply for funding under Land and Water, you have to keep it in outdoor recreation. And how we ensure that that is actually happening is we come out about every 5 years to do inspections of that property just to make sure that it is still functional and accessible to the public. We do have a grant floor and ceiling with our program. So 75,000 is our floor. And what that means is that your project has to be 150,000 or more because we reimburse 50% of that. And then our ceiling right now is 600,000, which means the project must equate to 1.2 million or more. We did raise this recently, and the reason for that, I'll talk a little bit, Sherry will actually talk about this later, but really has to do with the Build America, Buy America Act and some of these other requirements, federal requirements that, can make this process, we want your projects to be successful and we want you to apply for projects that are worth the money. And so we increased our floor to 75,000 recently. Eligible match. So pretty similar to RTP in some ways. So Cash, of course, is always going to be a good match. We do allow bonds to be used as match. So, but we do need documentation showing that that bond has already been issued for the project. Donations, we see a lot of different donations on our grant applications each year. In-kind labor and equipment can also be used as match. You just have to make sure you have the proper documentation for that. And if you have questions about what that looks like, please reach out to us. Also, matching grant dollars. You can do this. Typically with land and water, we do not allow the federal to federal match like RTP does, but we do allow things like Department of Economic Development grants often are allowed. So like community development block grants or local natural resource district grants. There's a lot of different local and state funding sources out there that we do allow match for this program with. And so think about that as you are applying. We do require that you have all of your documentation at the time you apply, because if you don't, it will automatically make the project ineligible. And so we want to make that really clear. Applications. So land and water, we do receive about 15 to 25 applications a year. This can be very contingent upon the year and how much funding, honestly, we're getting. And how many do we award? Again, this really depends on how much people are applying for, the types of projects and applications that we're getting. And so if we have several folks, apply for smaller grants, then we can push that money a little bit farther. But if we have some really big applications that were incredibly competitive and made it to the top of the list, then there's a little bit less. But for example, I mean, this year we funded 13 applications, which is the most we have funded in a very, very long time. And so one of the reasons for that is because a lot of them are smaller grants. I'm going to talk a little bit about our grant cycle. And this is just a typical grant cycle. It can fluctuate, just kind of like Alex was saying. When you're dealing with federal dollars, it can be a shorter time frame sometimes, and then we celebrate, or it can be a longer time frame. So just keep that in mind. So one of the first pieces, of course, is just that year one is really just our application period. And one of the things that we do with land and water is once you have applied, we go out to every single site that has applied, or village or entity that has put in an application, and we make sure that the site is eligible and that no ground disturbance has occurred. If any ground disturbance has occurred, or you've started to show that you are working actively constructing the site, it will be ineligible for land and water. Some of the other, so once we've done that, we do have our scoring committee come together and we rank all of the applications. Our scoring criteria is actually being updated right now, so keep an eye out for that. But then we go to our Board of Commissioners every January and we ask them to approve the list of ranked projects. Upon approval of that list, we notify each of our applicants that are being selected for funding. And at that time, you are not allowed to go out to bid or do any construction whatsoever. That comes when your grant agreement is actually in place. And so over the next several months, between like February and April, we go through that NEPA process that Alex was referring to, that National Environmental Policy Act. Basically what that's doing is just looking at impacts to the environment and cultural and historical resources and tribal resources. And so we are in constant communication with our applicants that have been selected for funding during this time frame. And so we try to keep open lines of communication during that time frame. And of course, during the entire grant cycle, but especially during this time frame, so we can get the package off to National Park Service as quickly as possible. Once that's done, so we get that over to National Park Service, and typically, we hope to hear from them usually within that July, June timeframe, but that's usually when we're doing our administrative grant training with you guys. And we're explaining procurement process, what the life cycle of the grant's going to look like, the annual reporting requirement for land and water. It's not too cumbersome, but each applicant that's awarded will receive an administrative training. And then the grant agreement is usually in place between July and October each year. So take a look at this timeline and recognize that, you may apply in September, but you don't actually have a grant agreement in place until about a year from there. We hope that it's faster than that, and sometimes it is. This year it is, but that's the reality of this federal funding. But when you get that grant agreement, that's when you can actually start your design and bidding and construction. So you can, like during that administrative training, we'll will enlighten you upon everything that you can be doing to prep yourself to get your project going and moved forward in a timely manner prior to the grant agreement in place, so that you are successful. Once that grant agreement's in place, you can start moving. And then, of course, design and construction happens within that next 2-year time frame. And then this is followed by a closeout inspection. So we will come out, make sure that you have fulfilled the requirements of the grant and what was in your grant, and then reimbursement. All right, this is a really important document. It's called SCORP. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it stands for the Statewide Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. What this is it's a culmination of demand and supply for outdoor recreation in Nebraska. But the other piece that's really important component in here that's really important are the goals. And the reason that it's important is because we highly rank some of the scoring within the application on these goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but they are found in Chapter 5 of this document. And you can request a hard copy as well, but it's found at our website right there. The reason that it's so important for the application is because we want to know how your project is helping inform or implement outdoor recreation goals that are set for Nebraska. These goals are created by an advisory committee of outdoor recreation professionals across the state, as well as they're informed through our public participation process that is statewide across the state every time this document's updated. It's updated every 5 years. And so what we want to know in your application is, how does your land and water project help implement one or more of these goals? The more goals that you can relate it to, the more opportunity you're going to have a higher score and be a competitive application. So keep that in mind. Some other things that are in this chapter of Chapter 5 that are really helpful for your application is these how-to sections. So one of the components of the land and water application is we want to know, how did you work with your public? How did you get their input on this project? And why is it important to your community? Did you do a survey? Did you do an assessment? How are you actually helping promote healthy lifestyles, for example, on this slide? And so that's really what these are for. There's one of these outlined in every goal of Chapter 5. And so use this to your advantage in your application. The other piece I would highly recommend that you guys use to your advantage is the action items that are within each goal. So basically what we're saying is, how do I implement promoting healthy lifestyles in my section of the state? Well, we really outline ways that you can do that. So try to tie those things to your application. The other bit that's in SCORP that's really important are these priority projects. Again, I already talked a little bit about that public participation process that we do when we update that document. That's how this list is created. We ask the public, the general public across the state, what do you use and what would you like to see more of in our state? And these are the top ranked items or amenities and facilities that people want to see more of in our state. And so make sure that your project aligns with one or more of these, because you can get more points in your application. And that's found on page 99 in SCORP. And then the last thing I'll touch on in SCORP, we haven't heavily promoted this in the past, and we're trying really hard to help folks understand the importance of wetlands in our state. We are part of the Central Flyway Zone in Nebraska, and that means that we have a huge migration flyway of birds and waterfowl that come through our state. But wetlands are also a really big component of outdoor recreation. And so we want to emphasize the point that we are adding some additional points in the scoring for wetlands. And so make sure that you check out ways that you can incorporate wetlands either into your project design, or maybe you're already maybe you're within a floodplain or near one, and it may not be part of your project, but maybe you could emphasize the point of how you are helping wetlands nearby with your outdoor recreation project. These are just some ways on the screen here that outdoor recreation can be influenced by wetlands. And so take a look at that. We also have a lot of different resources and documents online about it too. So with that, I am going to go ahead and pass this over to Sherry.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm assuming that most of you have already been to the LWCF page. This is where you're where you're registered and where you'll access the portal. We'll be putting up resources on that page to help you through that process. Today, you can access the application guide, and that covers the various questions in each section. Both the scoring form and templates are coming soon, so you'll have it all by May 6th, which gives you 4 months to apply. We're really making these modifications to help you create a better application, so you can clearly communicate to us what your proposed project is. Next slide, please. So we're saying new this round. We're having 2 rounds of review, but it's not new in the sense that we've always done the site inspection, which is part of this qualifying review. We've always looked at applications in terms of whether it's complete or not. We are just calling out as official 2 rounds, a qualifying review and then a scoring review, which is done by the committee. As I mentioned before, we revised some of those application questions. And then we have also are in the process of updating the scoring at this time. So that will be up maybe the end of the week or next week. One of the things that we have changed in timing is the CERT report. Previously, we had the CERT report run after an applicant was selected. Now we're going to have you do that as part of your application process, but we're going to provide what you need in terms of how you log on and create a report, sign it, and then upload it and include that. So CERT is the identification of environmental impact around your area. So there's some questions that are part of the application guide, and then this CERT report is in addition to that. So I know we're running short on time, so let me go get to the tips for you. So on the next slide, please. We've mentioned SCORP several times. That's our state directive on how to serve the public in providing outdoor recreation. So it's really important to help guide you in terms of how you create a project, and it's also a requirement as part of Land and Water. You use the application guide so that you know the questions that we ask about public involvement in defining that project, the difference between project partners and project supporters. In project partners, we're just really asking who has committed to work with you in either administering maintenance or perhaps administering the site in terms of arranging for who's coming and going or having events there, or if they're providing funding. That's what we call a project partner versus a project supporter, meaning somebody in the community who is saying, yes, we support this, it fits with what we need in the community. And we're also really interested, of course, who you're designing this outdoor recreation opportunity for. We, of course, suggest you start early, but if you're strategic about it, it isn't really such a issue with deadlines. Public involvement, of course, that takes a long time. You're aware of that, so you start that right away. Aligning funding might be a question that you have to look at strategically, because as we mentioned, you can have other sources of funding, and you need to make sure that funding is available so that your application gets through that first round, a process of qualifying. Because you have to fund this 100% before you're reimbursed. So take a look at that and make sure that aligns properly. Sometimes it might mean that you want to wait a year before you apply. And then there's a few things that are really on somebody else's timeline. SHPO, which is a review from the State Historical Society in terms of if your site has any historical significance that needs to be looked at. And then the CERT that I mentioned, you determine that area of effect, and then we look at what the environmental impacts are in that area that you need to watch out for. Like I said, those, if you run into something on CERT, most of them are fairly easy. You need to be aware of things like the bat season in terms of whether you're touching trees, those type of things. But sometimes you run into more issues than that. So when we put it at the beginning of the application, those can be addressed throughout a process, even if it happens to be a little longer. Consider pre-award costs. That's a tip to get you a little more match money. Most of you will have a cost estimate or concept design that involves fees from an architecture or engineering firm. That can be part of your match, but it needs to be identified and the paperwork needs to be submitted as part of your application process. We mentioned a little bit about BABA. For us, the threshold for BABA is 250,000. So anything below 250,000 could have a waiver. Otherwise, it has to be materials sourced and purchased here in the US. So that will be part of your bid documents. What you need to be concerned about in terms of BABA at this point is cost estimates. How does that apply to your cost estimates? If you are getting a cost estimate from a neighboring community that did it 3 years ago, and if they didn't use grant funding, they will not have to be BABA compliant. So you just need to consider that when you're looking at those cost estimates and whoever you're working with, so that everybody is aware of that piece. And the last tip is just reach out to us if you have a question. If it's a quick question, we're happy to answer it. If you have a little more in-depth, we're happy to set up time to go through that. So feel free to contact us. And if you, next slide is our contact information. There we go. I am full-time on LWCF, but Hannah and Aaron have what I want to say, the experience that I perhaps lack, that I haven't gained quite in this 3 months. So we will involve them if there is a question that I can't answer for you, and sometimes they'll answer you directly. So I think that's it for information on LWCF. What kind of questions do we have?
All right, we've had quite a few questions. Most of them, or actually all of them, have been answered in the Q&A. I guess some highlights would be that we had some questions about community outreach and with LWCF, and yes, definitely do that at any point. That can be done prior to your application, and we would actually support that, because you can use that outreach, how you've talked with your community, how you've figured out exactly what they need. That is something that you will speak to within the application and can really strengthen your application. Some other questions about, yes, you can apply for both RTP and LWCF in the same year. And yeah, I think everything else has been pretty much covered and pretty specific. Does anyone else have any questions about Land and Water Conservation Fund? Anna, did you have something that you would like to add in regards to any of the questions that we've answered online?
No, I think that's looking really good. The one thing I wanted to touch back on just really quick is with that CERT report. You know, for those of you that have never filled one of those out, they are pretty simple. And it's our conservation environmental review tool. And basically what it is, it's looking at threatened and endangered species on our landscape in Nebraska, and it's making sure that there's no impacts to those. And so in the past, we've always done that as the grant administrators. We've done it for you. And so we're creating a guide to kind of walk you through what that looks like. And so make sure you keep an eye out for that resource as well.
Oh, one other thing I did want to note is that, yes, tribes are eligible for both of these grants. We will be sending out a link to the webinar, I believe in approximately 2 days. So definitely before the end of the week, you will be receiving that. And yes, we had a question just come in about, are you able to fundraise and get donations before applying or during the application process? You can do all of that up until you hit submit on that application. Actually, you can do it after that too. It's just that then that money will not be counted towards your match for your application. Ending up with extra match is never a bad thing. So yeah, if you have additional questions on that, just reach out to one of us. And the question, are there chances reduced in getting both grants if applying for both? That's a really good question. Technically, no, because they're two very separate processes. But yeah, technically, no. I mean, I have yet to see somebody apply for both in the same year. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen, because you can use RTP as a match for LWCF if you can line up the applications at the appropriate time, which is actually kind of difficult to do. But yeah, at this point, no, it shouldn't really affect, because they're independent applications. Let's see, I think that's all we have going through. I know Alex is answering a question right now about if you have a CERT report for a project from 2023, is it advised that you do another one for 2024? I don't know exactly what he's answering, but I'm going to say yes, because some rules and regulations have changed from year to year. So that is something that you're going to have to update. And there's a question about scoring changes proposed for LWCF, because there was some, when it comes to what is actually scored, no, there are not major changes there, but to the way the application will look online for LWCF is changing, and some of the point totals and the way that it is scored and in what order is being, I guess, revamped. It's not a huge change, but it's just making it a little clearer, more concise, and all that information will be updated on the website, so you can take a solid look at that before you even start working on your application. All right, I guess we can hold out for another minute to see if there are any other questions that come through. Yes, you do have to do NEPA for Land and Water Conservation Fund. Most of the time, because just about everything in land and water is happening in an existing park. Not always. That's where the CERT report comes in. It helps start that process off. Almost every one of them comes back as no effect. And so, but that does happen throughout. It's just done before the award is awarded, before the grant is awarded. So that's part of that process with the National Park Service. So all of that's taken care of before you're awarded. So that does help you to hit the ground running a little faster once you have that grant award.
That's a really great point, is the distinction there between, NEPA's done prior to your grant agreement with Land and Water, but it's done after your grant agreement with RTP. So just keep that in mind. Both of them still take about 6 to 8 months, but yeah. All right, I think we will wrap it up then. Thank you all so much for attending. And like we said, I've done a recording of this webinar, so we will have that posted in the next day or two. There's also going to be a follow-up email with a PDF of this presentation for you guys. So thank you again and have a good day.